Joe Kissell takes control of iCloud. This is MacVoices. Today's MacVoices is supported by Kolide. Kolide ensures only secure devices can access your cloud apps. It's zero trust, tailor-made for Okta. Book a demo today at kolide.com/MacVoices. MacVoices is sponsored by RocketMoney. Stop throwing your money away. Cancel unwanted subscriptions the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is a talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, already I'm so happy we have Joe Kissell back so soon after his last appearance to talk about a new edition of a Take Control book. Joe, great to see you.
Nice to be here.
So we're going to be talking about the newest edition of Take Control of iCloud. But this book represents a little bit of a landmark for you.
Yeah, so this is the 9th edition of Take Control of iCloud, and it is our first 9th edition of anything. Like it used to be. So when I took over running Take Control books back in 2017, I did a lot of revised the website and stuff, and I'm looking at all the code, and I realized that certain things were set up to only work if you have up to 5 editions of a book, because it was inconceivable back in 2003 when this started, that any book would ever get past 5 editions. So I thought, some of our books might go beyond that, and I made some changes so that it could accommodate up to 10 editions. And just the other day, I was trying to fix something on the website, and I was looking at a counter, and it was like, you have to do this up to 11. I'm like, why 11? Why did I say to stop at 11? And then following through, yeah, right. That's because I figured at some point when I revised the code that we would only ever have up to 10 editions of something. And so if you get to 11, then looking back one is as far as you could ever go. And I started to realize, now, wait a minute, we just had a 9th edition of a book. So maybe I need to expand our system to accommodate a larger number of potential previous editions. So, but that just means, we've been doing this for a long time. I mean, for Take Control of iCloud to be at a 9th edition, and we don't even, it's not like we do a new edition every year. We don't do a new edition, and we do a new edition when we need a new edition. And in between, we have smaller updates. Some years we have, a year or two might go by where we don't have any new editions. And then before iCloud, there was Mobile Me, and before Mobile Me, there was .Mac. So this is a topic that I've been covering for a really, really, really long time. And in fact, when I sat down to work on this update, I thought it was going to be a pretty small update, because I'm like, well, what's changed recently? In the last year, Ventura and iOS 16. So what's changed? And I thought, well, it's not that much. There's a couple little things. And as I started going through the book, I'm like, oh yeah, that's changed too. And I forgot about that. And oh yeah, I got to rewrite this chapter. And that kept coming up so often that I realized, oh my goodness, we don't have a minor update. We have a new edition here. So I wrote it, and Glenn Fleischman edited it. And we went back and forth and made all of our changes. And Glenn's like, Joe, you brought up some stuff here that I did not realize. Now I got to go update a bunch of my books. I'm like, oh. So he updates his books. And then he's like, Joe, actually, in the course of updating my books, I realized that we both made a mistake about something in your iCloud book that has changed since that neither one of us realized. So now I've got to update it again. Probably the next update, which will be a very, very small one to fix a couple of stupid errors, will be out before this interview is. But it's just it's one of those things where it's always changing.
And you said that you don't do new editions unless you need them. Yeah. And so this means that you needed 9 editions of the iCloud book. Does that include the .Mac versions?
No. So I would have to go back and look through my archives. We had Take Control of .Mac, and I believe that went through several revisions. And you know how it is with us, if we have just there was a stupid typo and we have a little bug fix release, like a version 1.0.1, something like that. And then if there's some minor changes, like more than just a bug fix level, but still comparatively minor. We have to add a new page here or there or something like that. Then it'd be like a version 1.1. And then if we're like, oh crap, we had to rewrite half the book, or we had to add a new chapter or something like really big, then that would become version 2.0, and that's what we call a new edition. So like the .Mac book went through a bunch of revisions, and then we had the Mobile Me book, and that went through a bunch of revisions, and then we had the iCloud book. And so there was like, I would have to check my list, but there was probably like a version 1.1 and a 1.2. And then eventually we did a second edition version 2.0. And then there have been a whole bunch of updates over the years. And now here we are at 9.0, soon to be probably 9.1 because we're human.
Well, the reason I ask, and frankly, I forgot about the Mobile Me era of this service, but it really does go to show how much of an evolution there has been since .Mac was released, and then through Mobile Me, and now it's iCloud. And so, I'd like to think that it's been a largely positive evolution. I don't know if you would agree. I know there's still some sore spots, but
largely positive. .Mac wasn't even the beginning. That was the first one that we had a book about, but there was a predecessor to .Mac, which was iTools.
Oh,
and I remember when iTools was announced at Macworld in San Francisco. It was on my birthday, January 9th of. I don't even remember. It was back when like all of my hair was dark and it was quite a bit longer, and I didn't have so many wrinkles. Like, it was a long time ago. Anyways, but I remember like that was my birthday, and so as soon as the keynote was done, I'm there in our I was at Macworld Expo down in the basement, exhibiting with nicest software. And I was watching the keynote on a computer, and as soon as the keynote was done, it's like, okay, go sign up for your iTools account. So I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could get Joe at Mac.com. No, somebody else had that. It was probably an Apple employee. So I got the shortest email address I could, which was my initials, JWK. So I've had JWK at Mac.com since, and then that became JWK at me.com and JWK at iCloud.com. So, I would say over the years, the journey has not been linear. Like, it hasn't just gone from worse to better. There have been a lot of bumps, a lot of, Apple adds a feature, removes 3 features. Adds a new thing, makes this more complicated, makes this better, makes this worse. So there's been a lot of that going on. And over the years, Apple has also decided to sort of designate more things as being part of iCloud or as requiring iCloud. And there are things that aren't even really obvious. Like yesterday, I had to set up a new user account on one of my Macs to test something. And I wanted to just have like a plain vanilla account with nothing configured for testing purposes. And I wanted to turn on Apple Pay to try something. And when I tried to turn on Apple Pay, it said, "Oh, well, you have to have logged into an iCloud account before you can turn on Apple Pay." I'm like, really? Huh? I didn't like Apple Pay isn't really an iCloud feature, but it sort of relies on your iCloud account. And so there are just like a lot of things like that where you don't even realize it's not overtly part of iCloud, but Apple uses that same infrastructure to do all kinds of stuff.
Interesting. I did not know that either. Because frankly, usually one of the first things I do with any new device, even if I have just a virgin user that I keep for testing or troubleshooting purposes, you log into iCloud because there's so many things that can come in or that access, and so it's just a knee-jerk thing.
Yeah.
We have I'm not sure it's a bad habit. I think it's good for the listeners, but we often talk about kind of what's wrong with iCloud at the moment. How about some positive things in this latest iteration, or hopefully there are some positive things for this edition?
So
what are you seeing?
so well, I was getting ready to say, oh yeah, here's this positive thing. Then I realized, oh crap, there's actually some. Okay, that's life, right? Everything is like that. There's the good news and the bad news.
Yeah.
So what I was going to say was one of the really positive developments is that Apple is optionally encrypting more stuff end to end. Okay, so we've known like forever iMessages have been encrypted end to end. So that's great. That means that whatever conversations you're having with another person, that's just between you and another person, and nobody can snoop on that, not even Apple. So that's great. However, if you turn on iCloud backups for your phone or iPad or whatever, then your iMessages would get backed up as part of that. And because the backups were not encrypted end to end, somebody who could get into the backups could also get at your messages. So there were all these little loopholes where stuff is sort of secure, but not as secure as it could be or should be. And there have been well-known incidents where people's data was hacked into because somebody guessed a password or whatever, and information was stolen, or a government, maybe your government, maybe another government, got access to something. So we have always been wishing for more types of data to be encrypted. What about those backups? What about your photos? What about all the stuff in iCloud Drive? What about all these other things? Can it all be encrypted, not just in a way that encrypted, but Apple can access it, but actually encrypted in a way that Apple can't access it? So several months ago, Apple announced this new feature called Advanced Data Protection. And basically, if you turn on this new feature, then that's what happens, is most of the sorts of data that iCloud deals with that weren't already encrypted end-to-end now are. So that's great. Your backups are now safe, and your photos and your iCloud Drive stuff, like all this stuff, almost all the stuff is encrypted end to end now. And so that was what I thought was actually going to be the marquee feature of this new edition. Like, let's talk about the advanced data protection stuff. So I put that in there, and I was like, oh, this is great. I can't wait. I can't wait to turn this on. and then that's when I started realizing there are a few little catches. So one catch, just universally for everybody, no matter what, is that even if you turn on this feature, it's not going to encrypt your email or your calendars, your contacts end to end. And the reason for that is that in order for email to be encrypted end to end, the person on the other end has to be able to use whatever kind of encryption you use. And since you don't know what kind of email client or system or device somebody else may be using, it's really impossible for Apple to force encryption end to end on email. There are ways it can be done, but it requires cooperation from the other party. And same thing with like mail, with contacts and calendars. These use open standards, and lots of different apps and servers support these protocols, but they aren't encrypted by default. And unless all of those servers around the world were to adopt the same kind of encryption, it's not Apple's problem to make that work. Okay, so that's caveat number one. But number two is, you can't turn this on unless all of your Apple devices are up to date. So all of your Macs, iPads, iPhones, HomePods, Apple TV, Apple Watch. Now, the thing is, in our household, we have at least 6 devices that are connected to my iCloud account that cannot be updated to run the latest version of their respective operating system. Like, I have an old Apple Watch that I still use for some things, cannot be updated to the latest WatchOS. My kids have, like, my one kid has one of my old MacBook Pros, cannot come anywhere close to Ventura. Another kid has an iPad that cannot be updated to run iPadOS 16 and so forth. So the only way I can turn on this feature for myself is to either get rid of all those old devices and buy new ones that can support the latest operating systems, which, at a certain point, that becomes unrealistic, or disconnect all of those old devices from my account, which means that they could no longer then get at my app store purchases or my iTunes content or anything like that, which I also don't want to do. So I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place there. Also, when I started working on the book, the service was only available in the US. They've since expanded to Canada and are working on other countries. But I discovered this really great thing has a lot of catches, and even if you can get past all that and you turn it on, now you want to go on to the iCloud website for some reason, and oh, wait a minute, you can't get your data there because it's encrypted end to end. So there is a workaround where Apple will let you go through this process to give yourself access to some particular type of information, like just your photos or just your iCloud Drive stuff on the website for an hour. But then after that hour is over, that expires and you have to go through the process again. So it's great that more security is happening, but there are just there are a frustrating number of gotchas attached to it, and so that's kind of like how everything is. Oh crap, So there's just a lot of that going on.
Today's edition of Mac Voices is supported by RocketMoney at rocketmoney.com/MacVoices. Try it free for 30 days is enough time to try and completely forget about a subscription or service. Before you know it, you're paying for a subscription you don't use every single month. With RocketMoney, you can change that with a few quick taps. RocketMoney, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills, all in one place. Simply find the subscription you don't want and press cancel, and RocketMoney will cancel it for you. No more long hold times with customer service or tedious emailing back and forth. RocketMoney makes canceling subscriptions as easy as the click of a button. I've lost track of subscriptions and wasted money. I bet you have too. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/MacVoices. That's rocketmoney.com/MacVoices. rocketmoney.com/MacVoices. Thanks to RocketMoney for supporting this week's Mac Voices. This edition of Mac Voices is supported by Kolide at kolide.com/MacVoices. Our sponsor Kolide has some big news. If you're an Okta user, they can get your entire fleet to 100% compliance. How? If a device isn't compliant, the user can't log into your cloud apps until they fix the problem. It's that simple. Kolide patches one of the major holes in zero trust architecture, device compliance. Without Kolide, IT struggles to solve basic problems like keeping everyone's OS and browser up to date. Unsecure devices are logging into your company's apps because there's nothing there to stop them. Kolide is the only device trust solution that enforces compliance as part of authentication, and it's built to work seamlessly with Okta. The moment Kolide's agent detects a problem, it alerts the user and gives them instructions to fix it. If they don't fix the problem within a set time, they're blocked. Kolide's method means fewer support tickets, less frustration, and most importantly, 100% fleet compliance. Visit kolide.com/MacVoices to learn more or book a demo. That's Kolide, KOLIDE.com/MacVoices. Kolide.com/MacVoices. Thanks to Kolide for their support of Mac Voices. Okay, so a very specific question and then a very little more general question.
Okay.
I'm not sure about you, but I'm of a vintage that I have separate iCloud and App Store accounts. So, I know that trying to get things transferred between accounts is all but impossible.
Right.
You might as well just tell the sun not to come up.
Right.
That said, though, if let's just say you had one of those old iPads that you wanted to have a specific application for, I mean, could you not disconnect that from your account, create a new account just for that iPad, and then purchase that app so that it basically becomes a single-use machine?
I mean, I could, but at a certain point, repurchasing apps that I've already purchased under a different account becomes a little onerous. I mean, I'm really thinking of one app in particular that, we have a kid with disabilities, and it's a very specialized app that costs like hundreds of dollars, an iPad app that costs hundreds of dollars. And boy, I would really like to not like to have to buy that again. So it's that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, like we all do. I'm trying to think of workarounds. And how.
I mean, there's always a way. It's just can you tolerate the consequences of that way? So the consequences are either going to be inconvenience or expense or both. So. Right. As with everything, I just got to kind of think through those. So, like, a little aside, tangentially related, since we're talking about App Store purchases. So we moved to Canada a little over a year ago, and I had like this to-do list of all these things I have to deal with when moving to another country. And one of those things was, I know at some point I got to switch over my Apple ID account from like the US store to the Canadian store. And I figured it would be pretty simple, like, just switch me to Canada. Well, no, you try to do that, and Apple says, well, you can't do that as long as you have any active subscriptions, like you subscribe to Apple One or iTunes Match or any additional storage, or you have a subscription to an app. Well, as it turns out, at the moment that I figured out I couldn't have any active subscriptions before switching my Apple Store over, I had just renewed my Tweetbot annual subscription. So this is like February of 22. And so even though I could cancel that subscription, like I could say, don't renew it, basically, as far as Apple was concerned, well, you already paid for the year. So even though you canceled this, we still consider it an active subscription. So you can't switch your Apple account until that is timed out. So I had to wait a year. I had to wait a year before my Tweetbot subscription ran out so that I could switch my Apple store over to Canada. And as it turns out, like a week before that deadline, the whole thing happened with Twitter, and Tweetbot went away. So, all right. So I got to do it a week earlier than I otherwise would have. But so there are all these like hidden little things, and a lot of them just like they're not. It would never occur to you until you get in that situation where you actually try to do it.
That's really interesting because I know you have too. I have subscriptions that, if they're a year long and you decide to cancel them, some will say, if you cancel now, I mean, regardless of whether you paid for it or not, you're done.
Right.
You say cancel now, and you're locked out of that account and the capabilities. Others apparently like this. They view as, okay, you've paid for it, so whether you're going to use it or not, we will just continue to keep you on board until the end of your period. And I never really thought about that being considered an active subscription. But that's just a good tip.
Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't even care about the money. Like, I didn't want a proactive refund or anything. I just wanted to say, look, I want to get out of this. Like, I can't use this anymore, and I want to switch to the other thing. Can I switch to the other thing? No, you can't. So, most of my subscriptions with Apple were monthly. So, and then those that had been annual, I had previously switched to monthly because I knew this was coming, but I'd forgotten about this one. So, and I had set to auto renew. And so,
yeah. The more general comment question, I guess, because that is it a stretch to say that this is because they don't want, if you turn on that advanced protection, that they don't want less than potentially secure devices accessing your iCloud information? If you've shown that much interest in security and privacy, that represents a threat vector?
I think what Apple would probably say was that we baked the functionality needed to access these end-to-end encrypted things into operating systems starting with this version. So if you're still running, WatchOS 5 or whatever it was, and that operating system from years ago doesn't have this capability, and we stopped updating that operating system for that device 3 or 4 years ago, that would mean that in order for Apple to enable this thing to happen on that device, we would have to go back and update that older operating system. So what if they didn't? Then what would happen is that your old device, although it's still working, things would break on it. Things would break because it can no longer access that data, because access to that data requires these newer capabilities that require newer operating systems. So I think what Apple would probably say is the calculus is we don't want things to break. We think that would make users unhappy. If you're using an old device, of course, we'd rather you buy, $20,000 worth of new equipment every year. But if you happen to be using a device that's a few years old and it's, beyond the point that we support updates for, that's fine. We want things that are working to keep working as long as possible. And so if you turn on a new feature for your newer devices and then stuff that was working yesterday on your older devices stops working, we think you're going to be unhappy about that. And we would like you to not be unhappy. So we're just going to say you can't do that. There are more virtuous interpretations and less virtuous interpretations. Like there's the interpretation that Apple just wants you to buy new stuff all the time, and like that's not wrong, but I think in this particular case, the math probably comes down to which of these approaches will lead to less customer upset and less of a customer revolt. And I think breaking stuff that was working because you've turned on a new feature could get Apple in some trouble. And like for all I know, there might be legal issues or regulatory issues or something that makes it impossible for Apple to do that. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, I really respect the fact that you're just not couching it as bad Apple, greedy Apple, because there's so many of these issues that come up that there are a lot of different interpretations and a lot of different effects and reasons. I mean, part of me is saying, yeah, this is great because they're taking privacy seriously and they don't want to compromise the privacy. I also get the fact that I too have older devices that can't be updated, and I really am not anxious to have those just shut down on me. So yeah, you got to look at the big picture. It's like people that vote on one issue. That's a little bit narrow.
I agree with that.
So you said that this was kind of the marquee feature for this book and for this version of iCloud. Anything else significant changed in there that folks should go and buy the book for?
I have my list over here that I'm looking over. So another thing that happened was, and there's like 10 things on this, but another thing that happened was that Apple totally revamped the entire iCloud website. Now, a lot of people never go to the website. Like we experience iCloud as it's plumbing, right? It's infrastructure. We use email and calendars and contacts and iCloud Drive and all these other features, but we use them on our devices, on our iPhone or a Mac, whatever. And they're just sort of connected to iCloud in the background. And we never think about the website. But there is an iCloud.com website, which is pretty important for a few reasons. One is you can access most of your iCloud data, and you can even use online, web-based versions of keynote and numbers and pages there. You can do this if you happen to be away from your Apple devices, like, your device or devices are lost, stolen, missing, or you're on vacation and you need to do a thing, or you're at the office and you need to do a thing, or, whatever. So if you are in a situation where you cannot access your Apple devices, or you're using somebody else's device and you need to get at your data, that's a way to do it. Or if you aren't, you're not an Apple device owner, you're a Windows user or you're a Linux user, you can still have an iCloud account and you can still use a lot of iCloud features. But for some of them, because that capability isn't built into your operating system, you might need to go to the website. And then for everybody, there are a few tasks like dealing with some of your devices and some of your, like, restoring data that you've accidentally deleted, stuff like that can only be done on the website. So, of course, we have a chapter in the book about navigating the website and all the stuff you can do there, and Apple just totally changed it. So it's very, very, very much different now. So we had to revise that. And for some people, like, it's a big deal because they spend a lot of time on the website. For other people, it's kind of, I go there, once every 3 years or something like that. So that's one thing. And then there are a bunch of things that are just like, oh, wow, iOS 16 changed the steps you go through to share a file or a folder. Ventura changed the steps you go through to share a file or a folder, and that's not exciting. It's rather tedious because now I got to say, well, if you're using Monterey or earlier, do it this way. If you're using Ventura or later, do it this way. But a lot of things like that, sharing files and folders, that changed. The interface to do that changed significantly. The capabilities are still pretty much the same. It's just the way that you get at them is different. And then things like now you can not only share a photo album in the Photos app with somebody else, you can also share an entire Photos library with up to 5 other people. And that's something that, like, this was true in Ventura and iOS 16 and iPadOS 16. It is true in the, like we covered in the Photos book. But of course, it uses iCloud to do this. So we have to talk about that in the iCloud book as well. So those are a few things.
Joe Kissell is back in the next edition of MacVoices to finish up our conversation about iCloud and his latest edition of Take Control of iCloud. Specifically, Joe talks about one iCloud feature you probably don't want to use. That's next time on MacVoices. We'll see you then. As always, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.